Hello everybody, back with Patty Reed's doll, this time Chapter 4, Independence, Missouri. Next morning, after a short drive, we reached the outskirts of Independence and made our encampment. Patty and I stayed with Grandma and the boys while Mr. and Mrs. Reed and Puss rode into town. After a while, Puss and her mother came back and unwrapped the bundles to show us what they had bought. "How do I look in my new sunbonnet, Mother?" asked Mrs. Reed as she tried on a yellow straw braid bonnet in front of her little mirror. "Fine, daughter," answered Grandma. "That should keep the freckles off your nose and shade your eyes from the western sun." "Grandma, see my new parasol," grinned Puss. "We brought one for you too, Patty." "Mercy, child, can you carry a parasol and hold Billy's reins at the same time?" "Of course, Grandma. I only need one hand for Billy's reins." "Where's Papa?" Patty asked. "We left him in front of the wagon works bargaining with a noisy outfitter for some more wagons and supplies," her mother answered. "And guess what, Patty? We saw some Indians. They weren't like Grandma's Indians, though. These didn't have feathers in their hair or bows and arrows. They were just dark-skinned men in a ragged, dirty clothes, some of them with rings in their ears." Puss knew this would be exciting news. "They were Mexican and Indian traders," Mrs. Reed explained, "just in from Santa Fe. Independence is where they come to get outfitted. They had poor, tired-looking mules, so skinny their ribs showed, and horses with little bells jingling on their harnesses, and long trains of ox teams pulling queer tented wagons," Puss continued. "The Santa Fe Trail is a hard journey over deserts and through mountains. That is why they look so battered and footsore," Mrs. Reed added. "Do you suppose we will look that way when we arrive in California?" Patty wondered. Here is a picture of Patty, Grandmother Puss, and her mom in the wagon looking at the new stuff they purchased. Mr. Reed returned around dinner time and told us more about the bustling town of Independence. "I met a Mr. Thornton who is emigrating to Oregon with his invalid wife and a family by the name of Boggs from Missouri. They are waiting here for a Mr. Boone and his family from Kentucky." "Boone?" spoke up Grandma. "Must be some kin of old Daniel." Her eyes lighted up at the mention of this familiar pioneer name. Mr. Reed smiled as he answered, "Yes, ma'am." "A grandson, I was told. When Mr. Boone gets here, they all plan to hurry on to join Colonel Russell's California Company. They are waiting out there on the Canvas River. Do you think we could join them too?" Mrs. Reed asked. "The more wagons there are in our train, the safer we'll be when we get to Indian Territory." Patty squeezed me tighter at the mention of the dread word Indian, and we both leaned over anxiously to hear Mr. Reed's answer. "Yes, I have talked it over with George and Jacob Donner, and they agree it would be a good plan to overtake Colonel Russell and apply for admission to his train. We'd best not dilly-dally in Independence any longer than necessary. Folks hereabouts seem to think that nigh onto 7,000 wagons will go west this season. The first ones across will have the best pasturage and water." Next morning early, the men yoked up the reluctant oxen and headed in the bellowing cattle and were on their way again. The streets of Independence were as noisy and muddy and crowded as Puss had said they were. Ox teams, mule teams, and freight wagons of all sorts blocked the road while their owners haggled over prices. We stuck out our heads to see the Santa Fe traders we had been told about. As we rolled by, people waved and called out, "Good luck," just as they had back in Springfield. As we turned our backs on the morning sun and headed west, we heard Milt shout, "Goodbye, Independence! Ho for California!" And that is the end of Chapter 4. Check back with me when we read Chapter 5, Out on the Prairie. See you then.